book. It was challenging, the first one.
Because he wanted to be in the place of love.
Somebody came up with the idea.
And he was 100% accurate in his prediction.
Selenium, iodine, or calcium, you don't have to know any of that stuff. All you have to be able to do is chew.
We have a star-studded cast today, and how many of you have been to this nutritional panel before in the past? Great, great. We get a repeat performance here, that's great. And how many is this the first time? Wow, this is cool. Okay, good. Well, listen, I just want to say that we go into some depth on a number of different subjects, and you will have a chance to weigh in, no pun intended, at one point or another to take your questions. The questions are not to be just about your own personal self, but something that can be of service to all the people here in the room, okay? So think it through, and if you have any trouble with it, I'll help you reframe the question accordingly. But the first thing I want to do is just introduce the cast of characters. We have a wonderful and distinguished panel tonight. So first we have Dr. Robert Sorge, naturopath at large, a Bunda Health Center down in Asbury Park. There we go. A bow or a curtsy, please. Absolutely. Well, that one's for you, Brenda. This is, to his left is Brenda Cobb, nutritionist, teacher of detoxification, lots of things. You'll learn more about her. And Victor Kovinskis, next to her. He needs no introduction. And then a new panelist we have is Chad Ashley Vandenberg. Thank you, Chad, for coming. And the fellow who teaches us all every single year about, well, just very important things, James Boschman. So, I've had several of these folks on as guests on A Better World Radio and A Better World TV, so you really want to tune in at abetterworld.net. Come and you can actually listen to some of the interviews that I've done with Victoris and with Robert Sorge, and over time we'll get the other folks as well. So this is a good chance to just really tune in and get them in the comfort of your own home, by your own computer. I'm on after Gary Null every Tuesday at 1 o'clock on Progressive Radio Network. And you can tune in at abetterworld.net. So please join us, because we've got really a lot of great people on who are doing a lot of great teaching. So the first thing we're going to do is just open up with 2 minutes of each person to do a little bit of an introduction of what it is they do and what they're bringing to the dinner table. And then from there we'll go into some questions. Okay? Robert, will you begin?
Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Microphone?
If I can't, I'll put the microphone off, that's all.
No. He's got a big booming voice, and then he'll sing it.
Okay. Robert H. Sorge, Doctor of Naturopathic Medicine since 1964. And my contribution, hopefully, will be in this alternative. The alternative to what we know today as orthodox drug medicine.
Hi, I'm Brenda Cobb, founder of the Living Foods Institute in Atlanta, Georgia, and author of The Living Foods Lifestyle. And I healed breast and cervical cancer back in 1999 with organic, raw, and living foods and detoxification and cleansing. And I have a center, and I help other people to learn how they can help their bodies to heal naturally and restore, maintain, and have great optimum health.
Beautiful. Thanks, Brenda.
I'm Victoris Kovinskis. In the past, I was a theoretical mathematician and physicist. Now, I'm a lifestyle coach. I co-founded with Ann Wigmore many years ago the Hippocrates Health Institute, rated #1 by the spa industry. I continue to be very active educating there. I published and distributed and put her on the map, a book that became a bestseller, Survival in the 21st Century. And something else that I feel very proud of, I introduced enzymology to the world. I discovered in the enclaves of Harvard Medical Library the rare manuscripts of Dr. Owl. I tracked them down in a matter of 2 years. I found them. We co-authored the book, Food Enzymes for Health and Longevity, which has over 500 medical journal references. He taught me enzymatic product development, and I worked for his company where I took it from 6 employees within 3 years to over 130. Primarily teaching enzymology, and the next thing happened, everybody started copying our concept of the importance of enzymes, and probiotics became also added to all the private labels. So these are some of the things that I've been engaged in the industry. Thank you.
Thank you for this.
Hello, my name is Chad Ashley Vandenberg, freestyle mystic, primarily, transformation artist, and a nutritional explorer. And my body is my crucible, as the alchemist would say. I'm here to discover what works, and many people get the feedback going and get it out there, make easy systems for people to get the benefits of what we now call superfoods into life and help the revolution. Everybody's waking up to the fact of what these can do in our body. Let's make it streamlined, fun, and easy to get into the lives of the people that will touch the most. The company that I'm associated with is kind of a vehicle for that, Elements for Life. Thank you very much.
Beautiful. Thank you, Chad.
James Boschman, president of Randolph and James Flax Mills from Prince Albert, Saskatchewan, Canada. To get there, go to Minneapolis and then go about 1,000 miles northwest. Glad to be here again. I'm the token farmer on the group. I'm also, I don't believe in doctors, pills, potions, or fractionated foods. I come from a long line of people, about 200,000 generations, to the present, that lived long enough to breed, that lived long enough to breed, that ended up with me. You know what we ate? Food. It wasn't until about 1910, 1920 we started not eating food. Instead of eating corn, we ate cornstarch and corn syrup and corn sugar. Prior to that, we ate corn. We didn't eat vegetable oils, we ate vegetables. We didn't eat peanut oil, we ate peanuts. We didn't eat flax oil in capsules or pills, we ate flax. Amazing that for 3.5 million years we survived without doctors, long enough to breed, to have healthy populations, and we ate everything, most of it raw. And here we are. What a revolutionary theory.
Thank you, James. You know, that actually begs a question. We are living in different times right now. We are dealing with massive levels of pollution. In 1933, the Department of Agriculture declared that the land, the soil, was depleted of minerals, and we've been living on, I don't know, like fumes almost ever since. We are living in a heavily polluted society, and as a result, there has been a need for more concentrated kinds of foods, like some oils, flax put into an oil concentrate, etc. And so I'd actually like to hear each of you speak to this thought of, because we are living in the conditions we are, is there actually in the world of genetically modified foods and the like, prepackaged fast foods, etc., something we can still refer to as real food, real living food? Please, we're going to go this way. If you wouldn't mind, please try to keep your comments limited to about 2 to 3 minutes, okay?
2 minutes.
So then I don't have to ring the bell.
Doesn't matter what kind of land the apple is growing on. When you take that apple and juice it and concentrate the sugar and the syrup, you end up with 8% of whatever the original nutrition was in that apple. Who eats apples? No one. Who drinks apple juice? Everyone. Who drinks sweetened apple juice? Our kids. We're trying to train them to be type 2 diabetics. If you're going to juice something, juice celery. It's got no food value anyway. Don't ever commit the sin of juicing a carrot. You're getting about 10% of the nutrition in the carrot. Carrots are sweeter than sugar beets. Drink yourself 4 nice glasses of carrot juice every day. Guaranteed you'll have type 2 diabetes. Your sugar goes through the roof. Now, we can go to utopia, where all the land is pure and everything is organically grown. But when we take real live plants and send them to a plant and strip the sugar, the starch out and throw the rest away. In nature, wherever there is sugar, there are vitamins and minerals. Wherever there is fat, there is protein. So we throw away the vitamins and minerals and eat the sugar. And then half an hour later, we're starving. So we have another Coke and another donut. And we're still starving. So we have another one. But we still haven't gotten any nutrition or any food. Fat and protein always go together. What do? We damn fat. Don't eat fat. Take the skin off the chicken. Don't have fat of any kind unless it's canola oil, genetically modified, put in a bottle, dry cleaned, and you pour that on and say, that's food? I doubt it. 18 cobs of fresh corn give you a teaspoon of corn oil. Imagine the difference between a teaspoon of dead fat and 18 cobs of corn.
Awesome, wow. So, yeah, I'm thinking about the times that we live in, the polluted atmosphere, this culture, a lot like a species, like monkeys with matches, having made somewhat innocent but unconscious choices. Now we are all paying the price at the cellular level, toxins building up. And not only are our foods in a competition of resources and the elements of the soil, because the soil has been stripped down so much that this is making so that there's a competition of resources in the biology at the organ level of the body. So I'm suggesting that as a countermeasure in these times that we live in, it's important to learn what is the biological operation manual of the body, what elements do we need, and how much of them, and then find the most nutrient-dense places that we can possibly find, get it in large amounts, free from all of the things that cause our body to lose energy in the process, like the pesticides, the herbicides, of course, all that. But what kind of soil are these things growing in? Let's take our power back into our hands by treating the soil with love and bringing it all back together again, like the ancient technologies of all the ancient wisdom agricultural traditions. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you, Chad.
In the Essene tradition from the Dead Sea Scrolls, historian Josephus said that the Essenes, a community of 4,000, lived about, on the average, 126 years. The rest of the population of the known world, the average was 35 years. They lived on germinated seeds, which were also baby greens, and they were able to develop this technology right in the desert. For their fertilizer, actually, they used nothing but sea salt, excavated and consumed and used from the Dead Sea. Dr. Maynard Murray, a good friend of mine who passed away in 1985, I had the good fortune of knowing, he published a book called Sea Energy Agriculture. When his research showed that the optimal nutritional environment for growing of plants is the use of full spectrum of sea salt. You can use sea vegetables and many others, but sea salt will do it in proper dilution. I have been growing now for close to 25 years with sea salt as my major fertilizer. Nothing but successful results. The shelf life of my sprouts are 2 to 3 times longer. The wheatgrass, as well as the buckwheat, sunflower greens, are grown right in your own sink with nothing but just salt and water in the sink. So, and the result was, because of his research, he showed the impact of eugenics. Not only did it prevent, but it reversed DNA degeneration with experimental animals. He showed also other animals, when they were subject to stress, that would induce the degeneration of cardiovascular system. They were not being affected. Namely, the full spectrum of mineral are the driving force, not only for the DNA, but in the words of Dr. Hugevara, he said, the minerals are the enzymes for the enzymes. Now, that's mineral, full spectrum of mineral. You should get it from sea, ocean, in your plants as a fertilizer, or eating sea vegetables, and eating plants that are noted to have a full spectrum of minerals, such as the superfood blue-green algae in Klamath Falls, where it's like a mini ocean, and this algae has every known mineral. So remineralize, one thing, re-enzymize. Dr. Hagivara said, Dr. Leskovar, as a researcher, he showed that actually the consumption of orally administered enzymes within 20 minutes after taking it increases your natural defense of your immune system against the toxic environment. The natural killer cells go up by 1,300%, macrophages by 800%. In other words, it's the ally in toxic environment, because what breaks down is, number one, is your digestive process, and once that is broken down due to enzyme exhaustion, then you start flooding your body with incompletely metabolized macromolecules of starch, fat, and protein, and likewise the immune system has to take over, as well as the liver has to take over, and the thing that will help is get a strong enzymatic intake by way of fermented foods, by way of sprouts and silk seeds, by way of supplementation of enzymes, and then get a good green food into your diet, because, hey, everybody's anemic in this country by the standards of 50 years ago. They reduced the standards twice already so that not everyone would be anemic. That's a great way of curing. The way you reverse that is consume green foods. In my book, Survival, it shows from medical research every form of anemia is treated successfully with green foods, as well as also it prevents you from dying from lethal dosage of radiation. You're swimming in a storm of radiation. Bye-bye.
Taurus, thank you. And we'll be back to you. See what happens when you take lots of enzymes and algae?
The more organic, raw, and living foods, I have to agree totally with Victoris. The sprouted living foods with all of their enzymatic activity. And I also agree, let's eat the real food, and we don't have to eat the byproducts of it. We can get a lot of very good nourishment. And if you want to blend something up, just blend it up in your blender and make a nice, wonderful smoothie if you prefer. But, you know, it's so easy just to grab an apple, some celery, a cucumber, and just eat it. Makes it very, very easy. I also believe that a good raw superfood, and I also am a big proponent of the E3 that comes from Lake Klamath, because it does give us more of those minerals and so forth, even though that our soil has lost a lot of mineralization. We can make up for that with many of these superfoods. It doesn't have to be complicated, keeping it very, very simple and easy. And we also have found, too, that it's so simple. You can grow sprouts right in your own kitchen. You do not have to have a garden to do it. And you don't really have to have any big technology. It's simple. It's easy. And if there was something that happened to our food source and we were not able to get food for whatever reason, but we had some good seeds and we had some good filtered water, we could create our own food that would sustain life, and it would do it very well.
Beautiful. Thank you, Linda. That is so important and becoming more so as these months and years are going on.
Robert, okay. So as you can see, we have some diversity here. So if anyone is looking for conformity, you go down to the next seminar, which is a couple things down. We're going to have different experiences here, different concepts, different ideas, and if you're looking for conformity, what you have to do is take this information that you're getting here. We have no gurus here. This is information that you've got to take, digest, and see, okay, how does it work for you as the individual? I want to just say a couple points, one on the business of juicing. Solomon in his wisdom, 3,500 years ago, said there is a time and a place for everything under the sun. And I believe in all of this type of thing. Raw foods, juicing, wheatgrass, flaxseed, all the things that you see here. But I do not believe that this was something that we do as a religion forever and ever. In our system, we go through a process of detoxification, which involves supervised fasting, detoxification. We do use raw juices. I disagree with my colleague here on the juicing. There is a place for juicing. There's a place for carrot juice. Celery, to say that celery has no nutrition in it, we have to assume that we don't need bioorganic sodium, and almost every single person that I test out is deficient in bioorganic sodium, which is essential for the digestive system, essential for the colon digestion, everything in the intestines. As far as what Victor pointed out on the sea salt, I think his point is an excellent point on sea salt, but not all sea salt is sea salt. We need to clarify this. All salt falls into a category. No one earns any money selling salt. I don't care if it's Morton salt or sea salt or whatever it is. They demineralize the salt, sell the mineral aspect to industry, and leave us the insipid part. So we want to specifically explain, and I think that Victor probably would want to expound on this a little bit, the sea salt that I think is referring to is called the super salt, or in the health food stores they call it Celtic salt. Himalayan salt. Okay. So
Also.
yeah, okay. So we fall into certain categories here where we have stuff that is real salt that does have, as was pointed out, the minerals. And if we've got the minerals, if we got the mineralization that he's talking about, we got the foundation that the body will reproduce and manufacture some of these things. And I like the concept of enzyme exhaustion, because almost everyone, this is what we're dealing with, enzyme exhaustion. And why? Because of the whoppers and the doppers and the ploppers and the quick this and the quick that, and the things go better with Coke. And how about Starbucks? And Dunkin' and Donuts. And oh, no, I don't do that. I'm a vegan. I'm a this or that. Most of the people I see, they tell me, oh, yeah, we eat really wonderful. Okay, tell me what. I don't eat like my friends do. Okay. Oh, I eat organic, and I'm a vegan, I'm this and that. And then when we get down into the heart and soul of things, well, what is that you have for breakfast? And of course, I'm not judging anyone. I'm just writing it down. Breakfast of champions. And you have, what kind of coffee is that? Okay. And what do you put in the coffee? Okay. And lunch, Cracker Jacks, and hot dogs, and Whoppers, and golden fries, and Whopper Doos. And, okay, that's very good. We're going to have to work on this. So what's the end result of it? The end result is we have exactly what was pointed out here. So aptly, enzyme exhaustion. A beautiful term. I'm going to use that term if I can use it. I always used a different term, enzyme depletion, but I like this enzyme exhaustion even better. One of the ways, people, of getting the enzymes in, and this is the point I want to make, and I'm going to sit down, and that is where the juicing comes in. We believe that there's a place for juicing, and it's one of the ways of dealing with this enzyme exhaustion situation that was so aptly put together. When you take these juices and you run them through the juicer, what you've got is an enzyme therapy. That's what this is about, naturopathic medicine. Now, do we do this forever and ever? Well, maybe a little something, but we don't need a detoxification program forever and ever. We need to get into what is going to work for us as individual biochemical entities. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Sorge. We have an additional guest on our panel, a distinguished panel. Please, just if you would introduce yourself. I remember you from the past, but
yes.
Doctor.
The name is Dr. Benjamin Lane.
Yes.
And I have 6
Welcome.
degrees. My initial doctorate was in optometry. And my 5th degree was in human nutrition from Columbia University. And
What was your first degree?
My first degree was from Princeton University in philosophy of science with a minor in mathematics and physics.
Okay. Well, we're going to limit this discussion to nutrition tonight.
Okay. So the 4th degree was the 5th degree was human nutrition. The 4th degree was visual psychophysics. The 4th degree was human nutrition at Columbia University. The 5th, and the 6th was in the Department of Environmental Health Sciences. My program was in eye disease epidemiology and nutritional ophthalmology. And consequently, I was required to take the ophthalmology program, not for a degree in medicine, but for a certificate saying that I passed the ophthalmology program, as far as the didactic scientific portion, not surgery.
First of all, congratulations. Wow. I'm impressed. Now, Dr. Lane.
I do want to say a few words.
Can you answer the question that we have in front of us? And you have about 3 minutes.
And first of all, I do want to say that my work is in nutritional optometry. I do have an office in New York City at Madison Avenue at 49th Street and one in New Jersey. So I also do that. And I'm also teaching, but that's another story. Now, there's celery and then there's celery. The quality of the food is so important, and that's one of our major problems.
That's actually what the question was before you
Yes.
walked in. So you must have also taken a class in psychic intuition.
Absolutely. Now, raw celery that's wonderful quality has enzymes in it that are anti-carcinogenic.
Right.
And when that same celery is spoiled, it becomes a pro-carcinogen and promotes cancer. When you cook it, you can't tell which it was. I tell my patients, at least as to those foods we can eat raw without cooking, because some foods we should cook, we become connoisseurs as to quality. The only way we know the quality of a food is if we taste it and test it before it's cooked or processed. That's very important. And I want to say one other thing. When I've lectured in China and in India, I've prefaced my remarks to the audience to say that all the world came to your doorsteps to learn your cooking methods and your methods of using spice. Because what you did by that, before the days of refrigeration and fast transportation and sanitary water supply, before those days, what you did is you expanded the available food supply so that people that would have died if they didn't get cooked food, or if they didn't get any food, survived. And so we salute them. Our ancestors were not wrong in developing cooking and canning and all these other things. But today we can do better because we can get foods in better quality, refrigerated. But everything that's been said here is so appropriate. Because quality isn't just a matter of digging it out of the ground and protecting it so it doesn't spoil due to heat or things of that sort. But the quality of the nutrients in the ground and the way we nurture it as we bring it to the table is so important. That's basically what I wanted to say in answer to the question which I imagined you were asking.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Lin. It's wonderful. This raises the age-old question that we've been addressing here in various degrees. Oh, that could be a bad pun when you understand what the question is going to be. But that is this idea of the raw and the cooked. A French philosopher back in the late 19th, early 20th century named Claude Lévi-Strauss wrote a book called The Raw and the Cooked. He's an anthropologist and looked at this question of what is really most appropriate for human beings. And that, interestingly, remains a question for us today, even for us here in this room. I'd love to hear each of you weigh in on that idea of, is it all raw and no cooked, or is it somewhat raw and somewhat cooked, or what do you all have to say about that? Is that a question you'd like to have answered?
Yes.
Okay. Dr. Swords, will you begin? And we are going to limit you all to 2 minutes.
I have to borrow your glass of water.
Oh, you're going to take my water, too?
I might have to for Bill.
Leave it to Mitchell to do this, because I guarantee that you're not going to get the same answer from everyone here. You have people here on the panel that are going to talk to you raw, and from their experience and from what worked for them, it is probably, no question, right for them. It worked for them, they have to practice around it. My experience has been different. I started off as a vegetarian. I thought it was the right thing to do. It did not work for me long term. So I believe, again, what Solomon said, time and a place. I believe there is a time and a place. I think that if I was going to take the great majority of my patients, I'd put them through. Thank you, sir. I put them through a process that we call naturopathic detoxification. This is a combination of short fasts, raw juices. We then phase into a raw food program depending on the individual, some of the very things that you're going to hear today. And then at some point in time, depending on the vitality, depending on the healing, the circumstance, the evaluation on the test, we're going to phase people in to some cooked foods. But we believe that the majority should be, again, the raw, and I think that you've seen the reasons here at the panel. The exhaustion of enzymes, or what I called for many years the depletion of enzymes. Almost everyone has got problems in the gut. Colon problems, digestive problems, this is where it all starts. Starts with the putrefaction process. The body's not eliminating in a proper manner. So the raw foods makes a whole lot of sense. But now, is this something that we do continually, forever? That, I think, is something that I may have.
So the question is this. I'd like to know, one, of course, what your point of view is, but also, why is that point of view yours? We understand the raw to some extent, and everybody will elaborate further, having to do at least with the availability of enzymatic activity. But why then phase into cooked food? What's the reasoning behind it?
Well, you'll hear tonight at the panel various and sundry types of scientific reasons and everything. But we find something amazing about the science. Most people have a presupposition to begin with. By the way, I read Josephus, and I read about the Essenes. I don't remember reading anything in there, so maybe you'll have to give me exactly where that was in Josephus. So I read Josephus extensively, and the Essenes extensively, and I think sometimes we put more into the Essenes other than what they were. They were a mystic group, a sect of Judaism back 2,000 years ago. Whether or not they did all these things, and I don't find that in the literature, so you have to show me where that is. To answer that question, there is considerable information in the scientific community for eating higher amounts of protein. Now, at this panel, you're going to hear just the opposite. I'm just going to refer to a scientific book. I think everyone should have this in their, it's quite a thick book, but this is by a professor, a scientist by the name of Brian Peskin. And he goes back into Warburg's work. He goes back into the oxygen. He goes into every aspect of the minerals, the need for the body to have the protein. I recommend it's The Hidden Story of Cancer by Brian Scott Peskin, P-E-S-K-E-N, also co-authored by Habib, medical doctor. So that's the scientific backing, but we can't just go by that. I remember back some years ago, I came into New York City to have what I thought was going to be definitive. This is about maybe 20 years ago. It was a debate between Julian Whitaker and the late Robert Atkins. And it was, which diet is the best? Same thing that people are seeking out here. What's best? What do I eat? Do I eat vegetables and nothing else? But should I just go on wheatgrass? Should I just go on carrot juice? Or should I eat some grain? Should I eat this? Should I do that? Everyone is different as to how these things work. So I thought, well, here, this is going to finally answer this question for me. Both of these guys got up there, quoted from scientific journals, from medical journals. Seemed that they were quoting from the same stuff. They were saying the exact opposite. So it gets a little bit confusing. So I think what we have to do is we have to sort of work this thing out with your alternative medical doctor and then do some thinking yourself. Is this working for me? And I think that's probably the best way to go. I want to get away from this guruism. I want to get away from, everybody should eat raw foods forever and ever. Or everybody should eat meat forever and ever. I don't know. The New York Times interviewed me back some time ago, this Atkins. They asked him, what's the best diet? He said, well, everybody should eat this high meat, hot fat diet. And then the other guy was Pritikin. What should you eat? Well, here's what you eat. You eat these grains and high carbohydrate, and this is the best diet. They asked me, I said, I don't know. I don't know what's best. This is the reason that I do the evaluation that I do, using the latest scientific breakthrough in blood diagnostics specifically for nutrition, hormonal, metabolic assessment. Then I can at least get in there and make a better determination as to which way we should go with this, where we should start to put a sequence together with this. So that's my reason. The other is, oh, 1 second here.
1 second? Okay.
The other is, this is what I have found works for me and has worked for the majority of my patients.
Very good.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sorge.
If you don't know.
Well, I have the reason I believe what I believe is because it has helped me and healed me from serious disease, and that is a diet of 80% organic, raw, and living foods, meaning the sprouted foods, 20% of a cooked vegan diet. In the wintertime, I love a nice hot bowl of vegetable soup. And with that, I'm able really to satisfy what I have found has satisfied my needs and has helped my body. There is a book called The Essene Gospel of Peace. It is a translation from the Dead Sea Scrolls, and it's easy to find. That's on Amazon.
Is it real, or is it somebody's
It's real. No, it's real. You can.
I don't think you're going to find that in Josephus.
Okay. Well, I'm not talking about Josephus,
Well,
but anyway.
People can write anything on anything, and
it's based on the Habsburg Library manuscripts as well as the Vatican Library manuscripts. They have over 20 miles of catacombs,
of manuscripts, and Professor Sekeli spoke 5 ancient languages. He photographic memory, took it, memorized it, and also made it available. But it is available.
But it's in Josephus, is what I'm asking about. That's what you said. It's in Josephus.
Suzuki also read Aramaic. Impressive.
Okay, so getting back to what it is that and why I believe it works, not only have I seen that this 80% organic, raw, and living foods and the 20% cooked vegan food have worked for me, but I've had thousands of people that have come to my institute in Atlanta with various types of health issues and have seen it work for them as well. I also do believe that you've got to customize for each individual person. I think that's very important. There are some people who eat raw and living foods and they eat a primary diet of fruit, and actually eating a lot of fruit can be dangerous for some people and not healthy at all. And if you have a whole lot of sugar coming off of that fruit and you have candida and it's feeding that, and fungus, and that can even feed cancer or diabetes and so forth. I also do think that some juicing, green juices especially, I have found have been good, although I think that juicing carrots and other very high sugar juices I have found or have not been good for me or for other people that I have worked with. But I do agree that everyone's individual. And far be it from me to think that mine is the only way. It is just a way. It is one way. And it has helped a lot of people. They will agree that it has worked for them. There will be other people that say that didn't work for me and some other program has worked for me. So I believe that the main thing is I'm not up here to try to get you to think the way I do or to do what I do, but just to get you thinking for yourself. Because when you're thinking for yourself, you're investigating, you're coming to panels, you're talking to different people, and then you're coming up with what is going to be best suited for your own personal needs when it resonates with you. Because all in all, too, even though I know we're here talking about food tonight, there's many other aspects to healing. There's mental thinking, there's emotional healing, there's DNA that's going on, there's genetics. There's a lot of things that's happening in there. But we are talking about nutrition, there's stress, there's all of these things. But for me personally, 80% organic raw and living foods and 20% cooked vegan. I do add some of the superfoods, the super green powder and the blue-green algae along with that. I also definitely believe in the Himalayan salt and the Celtic sea salt. And so actually I think really from the whole panel that we're gathering bits and pieces of information that can all come together and work well together.
Beautiful. Thank you. What I just want to point out here is this theme of bio-individuality. In other words, not one size fits all. Right. Dr. Sorge has made that very clear. Brenda Cobb has made that very clear. Right. And we'll see what else is in store.
Weston Price, Dr. Weston Price, he wrote a book based on his observations on many primitive cultures, and his overall conclusion was that you'll be able to produce healthy offsprings with adequate nutrition, providing adequate nutrition for reproduction and work by consuming local, available whole foods. And I think that's a good premise for maintaining above average quality of health and having also reproductive capacity. We are seeing on our processed food diet, we have lost the reproductive, where about 60% of couples of reproductive age are sterile. We have a culture that about 70% of them are suffering from degenerative diseases that are considered incurable by the medical community. Whole foods is really the foundation, predominantly emphasizing in the most living form. There's many different traditions, schools of thought. You can go to the Vedas and Bhagavad Gita. They talk about tamasic, rajasic, and sattvic, which is basically cooked, then stimulating animal protein, and the third was all raw, basically 3 categories. Or you can go to the 4 category of the scenes, which went with the 3 described, and then the biogenic foods, which were the germinated, which had the highest life force from the point of view as like consuming the blood of a baby for a transplant versus that of a person who's suffering from AIDS and chronic fatigue. There's going to be a big difference on impact, and that includes also nutritionally speaking. The more alive it is, namely in the germination early stages, the higher is the overall nutritional impact on your wellness. So my suggestion is, we had a conference called Raw Summit. Now it's going to be the 4th one coming up this year 2009 at Hippocrates Health Institute. We saw a tremendous amount of ongoing battles over what is the correct diet and for raw foodism and all that kind of stuff. And we basically, from the point of generosity and effectiveness, we came to the conclusion that for therapy, combination of juices, superfoods, and raw food diets, that's for therapy. We saw the most optimal environment in conjunction with adequate hydration and detoxification, addressing them also from the point of view of spinal alignments, as well as also realigning yourself to joy and happiness through getting rid of negative thoughts, which have radical influence on the overall outcome. You realize that the largest wing in any hospital dealing with mental disorders, not with cancer or diabetes, it is with mental disorders. Any physician you'll speak to, they'll agree that basically psychotropic diseases are the #1 cause of disorders. So, and how is that? Because it leads to craving, what do we call them? Comfort foods. It helps to, in the same way like you take meds to tranquilize yourself, you can take also Tombstone Pizza as a good example, and tranquilize yourself, feel more comfortable with your thoughts of annihilation, trauma, stress that is existing in our culture. Dr. Gabriel Cousin, an outstanding researcher in his community Tree for Life, and I happen to be fortunate enough to be invited many years ago to write the introduction to spiritual nutrition. He speaks of all raw food diet for optimal experience in spirituality. By that time, you don't have any traumas. You're in a state of unconditional love 24/7. And basically, a raw food is perfect and appropriate. But as long as you're an average person, a person who is interested in getting the best out of one's life, a combination of Hippocrates at our Raw Summit, we concluded that 80% of the diet coming from raw, sprouted, and whole foods and superfoods, and 20% from cooked food, is one that will maintain you in a happy-go-lucky state. But the idea why you might say, well, on raw foods you can't get adequate nutrition, on raw foods you can't build your body. Well, at 60, in my book Survival, I got pictures of myself at 165 pounds, a bodybuilder, 1 pound of lean muscle mass a week. The low-protein diet is when you detoxify, your internal cellular membranes become very permeable to all the flow of amino acids and calorie and sugars, as well as essential fatty acids. So the baby on 1% protein type of diet, mother's breast milk, goes through the most rapid growth and development. We don't need a high protein diet. There's nothing wrong with a high protein diet if it is in a raw state. But once you start dealing with a heat treated high protein diet, then you're working in rapid degeneration. the high-protein diet when it was in a raw state, even when it was meat. The Eskimos, which means one who eats raw, they had no degeneration, and they lived right into their 90s and died from acidosis. However, when they introduced cooking, all of a sudden, the longevity of those who adapted this practice was reduced by 50%, as well as cancer, heart disorders became the #1 and #2 causes of death, namely high-protein diet in a heat-treated form. Even the Institute of Traumatology shows there's an inverse relationship between consumption of heat-treated protein and longevity. The more you consume, the shorter you live. And as a last commentary, you can go to January 1973 National Geographics, and you'll find a whole issue is devoted to longevity and health and vitality. Examination of the 3 cultures that were very noted, the Equatorians, the Hunzas, and the Georgians. And their consumption was about 35 grams of protein on a daily basis, 1,500 calories, and about 1/10 the fat intake of our culture as such. They lived way into the hundreds, and they were healthy, courting, flirting, and having an enjoyable time in the 80s, 90s, 110, riding horses, dancing away, etc., etc. They were forced into the, you might say, also doing all the other good holistic things like Stairmaster. Well, they didn't have escalators and they didn't have cars, so they had to climb mountains to visit their neighbors and to do agricultural work. They ran out of food at the end of the year during the spring, so they were forced to fast. All these are important rituals that make a difference. They had the purest water. They had the purest air. All these things add up, the overall stress on the organism. And they had to learn to get along with one another, so they had very gentle habits. Again, the mental stress was not there. So the holistic model is really the answer in terms of how you're going to proceed. If you look around, the people, Dr. Chopra said, if you want to see who's going to be subject for cardiovascular arrest and stress and stroke and whatever it might be, he says, just ask 2 questions. Are you happy? And then ask, are you happy with your job? If it's no, no, hey, they're subject for, heart attack anytime. Thank you.
Were the Hunzas and the Georgians and the Ecuadorians having sex into their hundreds, Victoris?
It's
yes or no?
It's yes, and it's tantric because they learned the value of semen conservation as a result. Right. They can continue on, keep on going with multiple orgasms. Thank you.
Yeah. So, I'm translating. The answer is yes. Very good. And he also means eat raw blubber. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That was quite good. So, religion, politics, and nutrition, I think they have a lot in common. We invest our identity and our sense of being right, and we think that there's a line. And somebody else has crossed that line, they might be a little bit different than us, and they might need some conversion or something. So what I want to just first recognize that we all make the best choices from our deep inner soul, from a place of innocence, and we put the best stuff we can figure out in us, and we watch what happens, and we share the information as time goes on and cultures learn. There's patterns, and they're observable. So I think before we decide what's right and wrong, we should just decide to reframe the language to what is appropriate, which raises the question, what are people for? And I think that's the unasked question that will determine what kind of fuel we put in us. Because if people are for just working through the day with just enough energy so that when they're done, they're too tired to have the creativity to create something that is uncontrollable, then all of a sudden, I think a cooked food diet is perfectly appropriate. And if a purpose of being human is to make manifest the creativity and the focus and the motivation and the very love and bliss of what it means to be human into the world with our architecture, our agriculture, and our cultural systems, then it's important that we have something that is going to fuel that. And to my knowledge, I don't claim to be right or wrong, but I look in nature and I see certain patterns. And I'm still looking, and I haven't reached the end of the journey, and I don't think I ever will. But I do know that along comes human beings, and we seem to be the most complex creatures on the planet, and yet Turtles live 1,500 years. Parrots live 300. Most species live 10 times birth to maturity, or more, give or take some. So a horse, when it's born, it takes 2.5 to 3 years to reach maturity, then it'll live 25 to 30 years. Okay? If humans had that going on, and we call maturity the day you get your driver's license, which it's not. Scientists actually say around 23, 24. Somewhere in that area, our bones stop developing fully. But we should be living according to that standard, that measure, be it right, be it wrong. It seems to hold true in the animal kingdom, 180 to 240 years. So I'm suggesting that if we want to just live a little bit healthier, 70 to 90 years, because that's what we believe is the role for the human being, then it doesn't matter. You can eat as much of anything you want. Have fun. Okay? But if we want to take our personal evolution to the next level, then we've got to ask, is there a set of principles? And what happens when I practice them? You want to find out which is right for you, you got to do them both. The effects that the people were talking about raw, some of them don't kick in for a year. Are you willing to make that commitment to find out? How many people have I ever seen say, well, you shouldn't do this or you shouldn't do that, but they never tried? I am somebody who haven't eaten a cooked meal in 5 years. Can I say that I would recommend that? No. Somebody gets a cast taken off, do you say run the 5-minute mile? No. Because we've been innocently making choices, consciously or unconsciously from birth, that got toxins in, that got organ systems depleted, and depleted our enzymes, and now we've got to make radical choices in the far direction to get the enzymes back in, to get the heavy metals, the toxicity, that kind of thing out. And I'm just saying, get the shoes off, get in contact with the electromagnetic fields of the earth like the animals, and don't destroy the enzymes in the food, which happens starting at 105 degrees. And at that point, your body's got to make a survival decision. Steal metabolic enzymes from organs, which would be used to grow nice skin and hair long into longevity, or digest some food. And so I'm just guessing that I'm going to keep exploring, and I'll keep giving you feedback what I discover.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chad. That represents some very high-level thinking, bringing in the subject of what is our purpose and what do we want to do with our lives. So it takes it out of the maintenance, just the basic sustenance level, and puts it into a domain of what can we as human beings actually create with the magnificence and the gift of our lives. So really appreciate that.
A couple fast comments. One about the Essenes. I don't know if it was nutritionally, politically, or religiously. They were there 2,000 years ago, but there's not many of them around today. That's number one. Number two, when I was about 17, I got picked up by the RCMP, and they gave me the 4th degree. That's the only degree I've completed.
Good thing you're sitting next to Mr. Lane.
But I did go to university. I've done a lot of reading. Really what I wanted to say was that my 200,000 generations prior to me, most of them produced hydrochloric acid in their stomachs, just like I do, just like every other omnivore in this world ever has. Going back a couple hundred generations, what did we eat? Whatever we could find locally. Berries today, roots the next day, grains the next day, duck eggs the next day, a rabbit the next day, a snake, an insect, a leaf, a berry, a whatever we could find. So what do I eat? Depending where I am, local food. I take my vegetables whole, but I do cook my potatoes. And I do a fantastic orange duck with wild rice. The wild rice is cooked, but the parsley and orange salad isn't, and the duck is cooked. But my ancestors, before our refrigeration and transportation, we smoked food, we dried food, we salted food, we cooked food, and we fermented food for storage. Because if we didn't, come the lean times, we'd have starved. So I eat everything. Now, I'm one of the young guys on this panel. I'm only 65, and I've been around a bit, and I generally don't put more than 12 hours a day in 7 days a week. But that omnivore diet seems to work for me. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you, James. Mixed in with a little Canadian humor.
Let's see, we can pick up on a few things. First, the Essenes. They practiced abstinence from sexual intercourse and things like that.
That's one of the reasons they're not
they,
here.
They did not begin.
You can take abstinence only so far.
So that's the point. You know, this has been such a fantastic symposium. I'm just sitting back enjoying it. But let me just comment. There are a lot of points here that have been made that are so excellent. On the issue of raw versus cooked, I chaired 4 years in a row the Nervo et Arvo's Nutritional Epidemiology Research in Vision and Ophthalmology. It was a special interest group meeting in the world's largest eye research conference, the Association for Research in Vision and Ophthalmology. And the first year that I chaired this meeting, I invited Walter Willett of Harvard to be the keynote speaker. You know Walter Willett's book, Eat, Drink, and Be Healthy? It's a very fine book. He also wrote the first book called Nutritional Epidemiology. He's considered the grandfather of nutritional epidemiology. So when he was my keynote speaker, we had a chance to chat after the session, and we were talking about our individual research studies, and I'd been working carotenoids, he'd been working carotenoids, and he was pointing out how his findings were that lutein and zeaxanthin were particularly helpful in preventing cataract. And so I said, well, you know, these vegetables that you mentioned, like turnip greens and kale and collard greens and spinach and even the lutein in raw corn, that there's a special value when we eat these raw, and that not only do we get the lutein and zeaxanthin, but we get all the vitamins that we'd want to obtain. And you know what Walter Willett said in response? He said, you know, that's quite right, of course, but when you cook those same vegetables, you'll eat twice as much, or much more, and then you get more lutein that way. So there's a point to be made. If there's a specific nutrient that you're trying to obtain, we are more quickly satisfied nutrition-wise when we eat raw foods. And some people might think we don't enjoy the food, that's why we put them down after a little while. But it's really that we are nutritionally satisfied. Exactly? In other words, it isn't that suddenly we're stopping eating that particular food, but we get the signal. I like to liken it. You know, we need to spend a few moments talking about appetite mechanisms. I think a lot of this problem has started with what's happened with appetite mechanisms. Clara Davis wrote in the 1920s, I don't know how she's related to Adele Davis, but anyhow, her research was replicated decade after decade. What she's shown in the 20s and in the 30s is that you take 4.5-year-old kids, put them in a hospital setting for many months, and then give them a wide variety of basically raw foods, but the milk was pasteurized and the eggs were loose cooked boiled and the shells removed. And you give them bread that was whole grain bread and baked. But everything else was raw. And give them these foods and let them self-select. And with the self-selection, they did better than when the mothers came in and selected the food for them. At 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, they were healthier. They grew taller. All the indices were better than when someone else came into selection. The appetite mechanisms dictated. The point is, it only works for undoctored foods. Undoctored foods. A moment ago,
Is that the apostat that you're referring to, which is a brain function that actually gets atrophied in people over time eating rather toxic foods?
You were just commenting a moment ago on the same phenomenon, really. And the point is that, you know, we can ask the question, and this question gets mishandled and malhandled. Is sugar a good or useful food? Well, it depends what sugar we're talking about. If we're talking about the intrinsic sugar that's in fruits and vegetables, it has the value for humans. If I put sugar in food for my cat is not attracted to eat it. She makes her own vitamin C. If we think about it, vitamin C in nature comes in foods that are intrinsically sweet, and it's only fully vitamin C when the foods develop their sweetness. So if we take an apple that is not ripe, it doesn't have the vitamin C of a ripe apple. And so sugar says to us, eat me, and eating me, you'll get what you need. You'll even get some B complex thrown in there too. Now, we eat it, and eventually, if it's raw food, we don't eat so much, and we get the signal that we have what we need. Have something else to do, we can get up and leave the table and go about doing it. However, when sugar is taken from our good food in nature and put into a candy bar that has no vitamins, has no vitamin C, has no B complex, all it's doing is tricking us. It's tricking us into eating it, and we eat, and we eat, and we're not getting what we're supposed to get from it. We're not getting the vitamin C, we're not getting the B complex. And it tastes good, we're getting the signal, we're doing what should be the right thing, but we're being tricked. And I think that's just so important. And it does bear on this because the whole problem is doctoring of foods. And cooking is one way to extend the food supply. It is doctoring. But it sometimes can be very useful. And when it's useful, it enables societies to succeed because that's the only way you can have the food edible without getting diseased. That's the right thing to do. You know, canned food loses a lot. But just imagine if they didn't heat the food to the right temperature and put it in a can, and a year later we open it and we see the can is swollen, puff of gas comes out, and we eat it and we die. So these techniques that others developed had their value at their time, and sometimes they still have value today. But raw food is celestial, and it's special. And I lived for many years entirely on raw food when I was a student at Columbia University. And, well, I did eat a little bit of bread, and the milk was pasteurized. I was lacto-ovo vegetarian, and the eggs were soft cooked, but everything else was raw. And so all these things work in all these combinations. And I think everybody in this panel tonight has been absolutely brilliant. And I just give them my endorsement if that's worth anything.
Wonderful. Thank you. So interesting, huh? Just a lively panel. It's great. You know, I'd like to bring up a question. We've talked about raw and cooked and live and not live. And could you take care of that cell phone, please, and all cell phones? That would be great. Have your conversations outside. The Institute of Aging, National Institute of Aging, did a study a number of years ago that I was aware of that stated that cells, when well hydrated, which is, by the way, a form of nutrition, water is a form of nutrition, it's not just a solvent, it's not just for hydrating. When cells were treated, with water, always, and they never got to a state of dehydration, they lived on and on and on as everybody sips a bit of water. So I'd like to pose the question, what is it that, if cells are properly taken care of, and we are nothing but actually a community of cells, if that's the case, why in the world do we die? We'll start there and we'll work this way. Now, I've got to keep you to 2 minutes. Okay, please help me by just monitoring yourself.
Kovinskis, the great Victoras Kovinskis, hit on a point when he was talking about proteins that have been damaged by too much heat. And so, I'm not exactly going to say why do we die, but why do we age prematurely? And so, about 25 years ago, I had the wonderful opportunity to see a whole flood of young athletes in their 20s and 30s and young 40s. And they were getting very serious eye disorders. And what was wrong with them? Was it that they were diabetic? Was it their inborn errors in metabolism? Were they drug users? Were they heavy smokers? Were they alcoholics? Or were they athletes? Well, they were athletes. And what were they doing? They were taking supplements of powdered protein. Now, there's nothing wrong intrinsically with taking a supplement of powdered protein. But they didn't know that when they took that powdered protein, designed for shelf life, it had lost all the vitamins that it needed for the proper utilization of that protein. And You know, I often say to patients, what's the most important vitamin for the eyes? And I say, it's a trick question, you can't answer it. I say, well, they're all equally important. Well, why is it then that some 4 seem so much more important than all the others? Vitamin B6, folic acid, which is also known as B9, vitamin C, and vitamin B12. Why do these seem so much more important than the others? Because these ones we're not getting enough of, and that's why they seem so important. Vitamin B6 is so essential for some of our functions that when we're eating protein and it's entering the small intestines, we need to have available vitamin B6 at that moment. If we took a supplement of B6 first thing in the morning, we're eating all our protein at night, it may not be sufficient to do the job to excite the transaminase enzymes in the brushboard of the small intestine so that they can convert the amino acids we get in the diet to the exact amino acid we need to make some special tissues like Brooks membrane in the eye, like the back of the iris, and it causes pigmentary glaucoma in young patients. And so the whole problem there is that cooking and denaturing has damaged the protein. So when we recycle, the body is always remodeling these tissues, but it can't make the right chemical. You need the original protein, and it can't make the original protein if everything we're eating has lost this good nutrition through the denaturing.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for your input.
Please. Longevity. We were talking about death, longevity,
Yep.
living.
I said, why must we die?
Okay. Hunsas, Essenes, Eskimos, etc. Well, some of the things that they had in common was they didn't sleep 8 hours a day, and they didn't eat 3 meals a day. That was invented with the Industrial Revolution. In the Middle Ages, even, you had 2 sleeps. You went to bed when it got dark, and then you got up about midnight, and you were up for a couple of hours. You went to Mass, you did Vespers, you visited with your neighbors, you had a little food, you burned 1 candle for sure, and then you went back to sleep and you had the second sleep. And when you got up in the morning, if there was food, you had some, and if there wasn't food, you went out and looked for some. And if you were full, you didn't eat just because it was noon, or because it was coffee time, or because dinner's on at 6. You ate when you were hungry. And I think the Essenes and the Hunsas and the Eskimos worked on that basis. So I think I'm doing quite well eating only when I'm hungry. The only thing that we haven't talked about that I try and add to my diet pretty well every day, 5 days a week at least, 2 glasses of fine red wine with dinner.
Amen. Thank you, James.
Thank you. So I think your question was specifically in connection with hydration of the cell and its ability to, or why do we die?
I use that as an example to show that life can continue.
Okay. So my comment on that is that the very same rare trace elements that create a charge between the inner membrane of a cell and the outer membrane is what allows it to stay hydrated. And those same elements are the building blocks that we use for neuropeptides and the running of our organs. All of our systems require a full spectrum of trace elements. If we don't get them, the body goes into stress response. And here's the connection. The stress response, mentally, emotionally, translates to a physical tightening. You ever hear this phrase, somebody's all wound up? Well, literally, at the DNA level, research reveals the DNA helix is getting tighter. The interesting thing about the aging process is this is the biological definition of aging. As the DNA helix gets tighter, it stops replicating. It only gets a certain number of tightening of the ratchet of the DNA. And when it gets tighter, different codons line up. Different RNA and DNA line up. So what genes we think we have that are the cancer gene or the diabetes gene, all of these things are expressed or not expressed based on our choices, conscious or unconscious. So our cells, they're living in the kingdom of our body. When we learn the rules and the laws that allow us to bless the kingdom of our body at the cellular level, all of a sudden, it doesn't have to die. Thank you.
There we go. Thank you. I was wondering who was going to answer like that.
Chopra and Dr. Chopra, of course, and the vibrational medicine field they talk about the DNA potential and the evolution of the DNA, or the degeneration of DNA, exists within, outside of the physical realms. In other words, there is a memory that is accessible to the DNA. Whether it's going to continue to evolve into its optimal maximum potential or it's going to degenerate, it's totally dependent on the nutritional environment and the holistic environment. In other words, your state of consciousness, etc., etc. You know, understand what I'm talking about. So if you can optimize the overall nutritional environment, you can change the future of destiny. And that is, first of all, Dr. Hayflick, one of the great names in the field of longevity, there is such thing as Hayflick limit. Namely, the cells are capable of most 90 reproductions under optimal laboratory diet. But as soon as you add extra vitamin E or vitamin C, all of a sudden it goes up to 120 cellular reproductions. Alexis Carrel, a Nobel Prize recipient, he kept a tissue of chicken heart alive for tens and tens of thousands of reproductions, totally beating the Hayflick limit through detoxification and optimal nutrition. That's really what it comes down. Detoxification and optimal nutrition. Dr. Child, a Nobel Prize recipient, in conjunction with Julian Huxley from University of Chicago, both outstanding researchers, took small animals and experimented with them, and as long as they give them optimal nutrition for their particular species and fasted them periodically, 17 generations later, they were as young as ever. Just like our colleagues expressed, the human potential is definitely much more than 200 years. I mean, if you take your dog or cat, it lives within 6 months, it has reached sexual maturity. And if that is a measure of time, then it lives easily for 20 years. That's 40 times the time that it takes to reach sexual maturity. If you took a human young man, reach sexual maturity at 15, and that's actually very young, multiply by 40, you're looking at 600 years. Methuselah numbers. The whole issue of maintaining the human organism comes down to ability to balance the stresses against the internal nutritional integrity and harmony so that it can live with these stresses. And why would you want to live a long time? Well, heck, you keep on coming back to this damn planet through incarnation after incarnation because you can't get it straight on any one of those reincarnations, because you can't do that on a 60, 100-year time frame. Methuselah, 1,000 years? Were they BSing? I don't think so. In the Bible, they're talking about 1,000 years. The thing is, we're here, we're very unique, we're coming into a symphony of personal evolution. We all are extensions of the Creator, and we all have our own dharma, our own passion, our uniqueness. And if we could connect to that source, where at every moment you are experiencing bliss because you're connected to what your life is all about, and you can extend that bliss and that surplus energy to everyone else and make life unfold into a new, ever dynamic symphony of joy. That's what it's all about. Each one of us evolving into our optimal. And it might take more than 60 years or 120 years. And I think it's worthwhile to explore this adventure and the potential that we are capable of. It's much more than eat and drink and reproduce and also have a job and whatever it is. You want to become who you came to become. Every one of you are unique, divine, and you came with a purpose. But most of us fall asleep at the start, and we never wake up until, again, we're re-evaluating ourselves after we've gone through the mortician and planning our next incarnation. Why not do it right on? Right now. You have that potential. We're stepping into an era, I can guarantee you, that people are going to be living hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, who are going to be living according to the laws of raw nature.
We are the only entities, except for our pets, not only are sick, but also are eating cooked foods, and it creates all kind of aging complication. Aging is totally unknown in the ocean. It's totally unknown within the wild species. They eat one another before they get old. But, hey, we don't have to go that way. So what I'm saying is that the human potential movement is definitely raw, but it's okay to stay as long as you feel like it's your thing to stay. But I'm saying you're capable of staying much longer than you ever fantasized of being able to do that. God bless you.
Thank you, Victoria. Eat whatever you want, but eat raw. I just translated.
10 minutes and we're finished? Okay, we'll make it quick. I do believe that we all have the potential to live much longer. If it were possible that we could live in a stress-free environment and we didn't have to deal with a lot of the things that we do, I think it's more important that we are living our joy, our passion, our mission in life, the reason that we came here, not only being creative and being the best we can be, but helping other people to realize their potential. I do believe we can live longer when we eat better, when we think better, when we love more, when we care more about not only ourselves but the entire planet, when we become connected with everything about the planet, when we're connected with the animals, not eating them, loving them, and that all of us do have that potential, and that we can live hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and thousands of years. I believe that the future of that is coming. I mean, today, I know at my center, we're doing DNA reprogramming work that was not even available. I didn't even know about it, several years ago. But now we're seeing that it is very possible. So we're in this time of this quantum healing energy. Whereas before, 10 years ago, when I was diagnosed with cancer, it took me 6 months on this whole protocol to heal. But now I'm seeing that people are coming in that have far advanced, much more serious diseases than I had that are healing much, much quicker. Okay, so we are in that quantum healing energy field. We've heard reference to Dr. Chopra many times tonight. You know, he says as long as we're eating the animals, we're never going to be bringing peace and total love and healing to the planet. And so let's stop eating them, okay, and let's eat all the plants and the herbs and the grasses and everything that was given to us, and let's love and become one with nature and really in that harmony. And I think that life can go on much, much longer. And you know what? I think it'll be more fun to be alive.
All right. Thank you so much, Brenda. And he hasn't even said a word.
We've touched on so many things here that I forgot. I don't even know what the question is anymore, but it seems that we've gone into some reincarnation, don't eat the animals, whole kinds of things. I don't know where people get these ideas from, but I'm sure that they've come along some way, and some of us believe this type of thing. But I'll just go on record. I do not believe in reincarnation. I believe that the animals were put here by the Almighty for the purpose of eating, and you just don't eat. You may say whatever you want. Say whatever. I'm going to go on record.
Give him the courtesy.
People, I'm going to go on record saying this. Okay?
Boo to you.
Yeah, say boo you want. What did Moses eat?
Boo again.
What did Moses? Boo all you want. Believe what you want. But it's not from a biblical standpoint. You cannot verify this by God Almighty. You can verify it through Hinduism, with all kinds of foreign types of religions, and that's what you brought into this. So because you brought into it, that's the reason I'm addressing it. So let's go now to the question of should we live forever? I don't think so. I think that we have a limitation. This is the same question that man has been attempting to do forever on his own. I believe that, like most of the panelists, that we are far from what our potential is. Why are we far from our potential? The foods have something to do with it. The stresses have something to do with it. Mitch pointed out about the water. You know, it's like amazing. You would do a urine analysis every time you go to the medical doctor, and when he does the urine analysis, he does a test that's called the specific gravity test, and it's a very simple test. because almost everyone that comes into my office is subclinically dehydrated. Think of the body as a bag of water, about 78%. The question is, what kind of water? Do we have pure water or do we have dirty water? And most people is like a bag of sewer bag that they're walking around with that overruns the body's excretory system. It can no longer deal with this, so it affects the next thing at the cellular level, which is oxygen. Nutrients can't get to where they're supposed to get. The blood goes into a state of metabolic acidosis, sucks the rest of the oxygen, and then we have all of these named diseases. And I'd like to close off by saying this. We may have some differences of opinion here, some differences of opinion at all these different levels, including the spiritual. Okay, that's okay. But I think the one thing tonight that we can all agree on, every single one of us, is that we have an enemy from within. Millions of Americans have been compromised. Hundreds of thousands of our loved ones have been murdered in cold blood by the pharmaceutical trust. Every single one. Maimed and murdered, a crime so big that it is beyond what anybody thinks of as criminal anymore. We had these criminals finally make it before the subcommittee of the United States Congress. They were asked to raise their right hand and swear, put the hand on the Bible, by the way. Just by the way. I don't know if anybody ever read what they're putting their hand on, but it was on the Bible. That's what it was on, just so you know. It wasn't a book of reincarnation or anything like that. It was the Holy Bible. Swear! Swear by Almighty God to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth. And every once in a while, the truth does surface, people. Every once in a while. And the question by the United States Senate was, look, you knew about the people that you were harming and all these deaths and everything about 2 or 3 years before. Wasn't that true, sir? Oh, yes, it is. Well, sir, why didn't you tell the public? These people who you are people who you are rendering the service of giving these nice, wonderful medicines to. Now, people, listen very carefully to this. We may disagree on a lot of things, but this one thing I want to indelibly imprint on your mind, and do not leave here until this is indelible on the mind. This is what the truth serves. These are the words of the pharmaceutical trust, the enemies of the people. Words that come out of their mouth. Our first, this is the answer, our first obligation is to our profits and to the shareholders of our company. End of quote. This is the enemy within. Can you put trust in these people? Can you put trust in the medical doctor that blindly just writes those prescriptions? I think that if you took anything that anybody said tonight, and there's certain things that we agree with, certain things we disagree with, if you take anything that anybody said here and apply it to your life, you're going to be way, way ahead of the enemy of the people within. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, we have had quite a time here tonight, haven't we? I'm not sure if it was a nutritional panel or a revival meeting. But it has been a great combination of all. I owe you all that I take your questions next time we do this in the next Expo, because out of time, and I guess I had too many questions. But I was trying to answer what I felt was coming from the crowd, and I beg your indulgence. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.